After her marriage to Sean Connery, actress Diane Sento released a tell-all book that shocked the entertainment industry. In it, she peeled back the curtain on the enigmatic actor's private life, revealing a man as complex and compelling off-screen as he was on it. Connery, widely admired for his paradoxical blend of rugged masculinity and graceful composure, had long been a figure of fascination. Known to millions as the iconic James Bond, he was once simply Thomas Sean Connery, a boy from humble beginnings whose life journey was filled with ambition, heartache, and unexpected turns. Born into a working-class family in Edinburgh, Scotland, Connery's roots were modest. His father worked both as a factory laborer and a truck driver, while his mother cleaned houses to support the family. From an early age, young Sean, called Tommy by childhood friends, understood the value of hard work. At just 9 years old, he started delivering milk before school. By 12, he had already outgrown most of his peers, both in stature and in responsibility. Standing over 6 feet tall by the age of 16, he earned the nickname Big Tam, a nod to his size and strength. But life wasn't just about labor and growth spurts. Connery was curious about the world and eager to make something of himself. Although too young to serve in Wabiwat, Connery joined the Royal Navy as soon as he turned 16. He immersed himself in military life, training at gunnery school and serving with an anti-aircraft crew. He even got 2 tattoos, one a tribute to his family, the other boldly proclaiming Scotland forever. But his time in the service was cut short. After just 3 years, Connery developed a painful duodenal ulcer that led to a medical discharge. The setback left him adrift, a teenager with no career and no clear direction. He returned home to Edinburgh and cycled through a series of jobs: truck driver, lifeguard, coffin polisher, and even nude model for art classes. Despite the uncertainty, one constant remained: his dedication to physical fitness. Connery spent hours in the gym sculpting his physique and eventually took part in bodybuilding competitions. Though his chiseled frame earned him attention, Connery's path to glory was still uncertain. He loved bodybuilding, but he also loved playing football. Unlike the American bodybuilders he competed against, Connery couldn't resist the call of the pitch. His athleticism paid off when, at 23, the manager of Manchester United offered him a contract. For most young men in Britain, this would have been the dream of a lifetime, yet Connery, ever practical, turned it down. He knew the life of a footballer was fleeting, and the career often ended by age 30. Instead, he chose the uncertain road of acting, a decision that would change his life. The pivot to performing came almost by accident. A fellow bodybuilder tipped him off about open auditions for a touring production of South Pacific. Connery auditioned and landed a small part as a chorus boy. He had no formal training, but his commanding presence and relentless work ethic helped him climb the ranks. During the tour, he gained experience, exposure, and a network of industry contacts that would prove invaluable. More importantly, he discovered a passion for acting that surpassed even his love for sport. It was during this time that Connery also fell deeply in love. He began dating Carol Sopel, a striking, dark-haired woman who was part of the theatrical world. Their romance seemed destined for greatness, two beautiful, ambitious people navigating the same glamorous circles. But love, like fame, can be fickle. Despite their deep bond, their relationship gradually unraveled under the strain of Connery's rising career and the constant demands of life on the road. Their breakup left Connery devastated, but also more driven than ever to succeed. The heartbreak seemed to fuel his determination to make something of himself, not just for fame or money, but to prove that a kid from Edinburgh with rough hands and big dreams could transform into a legend. Sopel was Jewish, and while she and Connery shared a passionate bond, her family held strong reservations about their relationship. They disapproved of Connery's background, considering him an outsider and an unsuitable match for their daughter. Tensions escalated quickly. Her family, protective and firm in their beliefs, told Connery outright to stay away from her. Despite the genuine affection between Carol and Sean, the pressure became unbearable. The relationship, intense as it was, ended almost as suddenly as it had begun, leaving Connery heartbroken and more guarded in matters of love. But heartbreak wasn't the only adversity he faced. Having grown up in the gritty neighborhoods of Edinburgh, Connery had learned to be tough, but nothing in his youth compared to the life-threatening experience that would turn him into a local legend. One night, he was at a pool hall when members of the feared Valder gang, known for their violence and dominance in the area, tried to steal his jacket. Rather than back down, Connery stood his ground. The confrontation escalated quickly, and later that night, 6 members of the gang followed him into the dark streets. Alone and vastly outnumbered, Connery didn't run. Instead, he made the split-second decision to fight. What followed became the stuff of neighborhood folklore. One man taking on 6 and walking away the victor. He took each of them down with brute strength and sheer will. From that moment on, Connery wasn't just another working-class kid. He was a respected figure among even the toughest in town, a man who could hold his own when it mattered most. Still, his true ambitions lay elsewhere. In between odd jobs and survival, Connery threw himself into the craft of acting. He studied tirelessly, reading plays, analyzing performances, and doing everything he could to refine his skills. He knew that to be taken seriously, he'd need to go beyond the brute image that surrounded him. He enrolled in elocution lessons to soften his thick Scottish brogue, hoping to gain a more versatile and appealing voice for the screen. It was a slow and often discouraging process. During the 1950s, Connery hustled like never before. He took on minor roles in theater productions, appeared as background characters in television shows, and accepted bit parts in low-budget films. Between gigs, he babysat for friends and acquaintances just to keep a roof over his head. Casting. Directors started to notice his unique blend of physicality and charm, often casting him as blue-collar characters, truck drivers, laborers, or scrappy boxers. These roles, though small, gave him valuable experience and visibility. Then came a breakthrough. He was cast alongside Hollywood star Lana Turner in the film Another Time, Another Place. It was a significant moment, signaling his entry into the realm of major productions. But even as the cameras rolled, challenges loomed. Behind the scenes, tensions flared. Turner's boyfriend at the time, notorious gangster Johnny Stompanato, grew jealous of Connery, suspecting there was more than just professional chemistry between the two. What followed would push Connery into yet another confrontation, but this one had international headlines waiting on the other side. Connery took it upon himself to show Lana Turner around London, acting as her informal guide through the city. But this innocent gesture sparked a wave of suspicion in Turner's boyfriend, Johnny Stompanato, a notorious American gangster with deep ties to organized crime. Believing there was more than a professional relationship between Turner and Connery, Stompanato hopped on a flight from Los Angeles to London. When he arrived, the situation quickly escalated into something out of a crime drama. Enraged and jealous, Stompanato stormed onto the set and confronted Connery, brandishing a gun. It was a grave miscalculation. Connery, ever the embodiment of steely calm, wasted no time. In a swift and decisive move, he disarmed the gangster and knocked him flat. The producers immediately banned Stompanato from the film set, and Scotland Yard soon intervened. Officers escorted him to the airport and deported him from the UK. The message was clear: don't mess with Sean Connery. Despite his rough edges and reputation as a ladies' man, Connery wasn't always instantly charming. Photographer Julie Hamilton initially found him off-putting, admitting that she thought he was appalling when they first met. But Connery had fallen hard for her, and in time won her over. They moved into a modest London flat together, and began to share their lives. Hamilton supported Connery through his struggling years as he fought to establish himself as a serious actor, but the relationship wasn't one-sided. In 1960, Hamilton was diagnosed with tuberculosis, a potentially deadly disease at the time. Just as this news broke, Connery was offered the role of a lifetime in the Charlton Heston epic El Cid de Bassett. It was a major opportunity, but Connery made a choice that surprised many. He turned down the role to care for Hamilton during her illness. Fortunately, the studio later gave him a second chance, but the decision showed a different side of him, deeply loyal, even self-sacrificing. Everyone expected Connery and Hamilton to marry, but one careless moment destroyed it all. While lying. In bed one evening, Connery casually mentioned, "What incredible eyes Diana has got." He was working with married actress Diane Sento at the time, and Hamilton immediately sensed something was wrong. Confronted, Connery confessed that his feelings for Hamilton had faded. The breakup was immediate and final. Years later, however, The two crossed paths again. By then, Hamilton had married and had a child, a son she named Jason in memory of Connery and the support he once gave her. Touched, Connery later fulfilled a promise and named his own son Jason as well. Falling for Diane Sento had complicated consequences. She was still married when their affair began, and though the relationship faced challenges, it also opened new doors. Sento introduced Connery to producer Harry Saltzman, who was working on adapting Ian Fleming's James Bond novels for the screen. Getting the role wasn't simple. Fleming had wanted Cary Grant, but the actor only agreed to one film, while the producers aimed to build a franchise. After a failed Find James Bond contest, the producers reconsidered Connery. He decided to leave a lasting impression. At his audition, he wore wrinkled clothes and carried himself with an unapologetic swagger. Oddly enough, this worked. The producers saw in him the raw charisma and confidence that Bond needed. Once cast, Connery underwent extensive training to smooth out his accent and refine his image. The transformation was crucial. Bond needed to be polished, clever, and impossibly cool. The filmmakers worked hard to craft the spy's iconic screen entrance, where Connery famously introduces himself as Bond James Bond. That line and delivery would become etched into cinematic history. The film, Dr. No, was a colossal hit, and just before it premiered, Sento finalized her divorce. She soon became pregnant with Connery's child, and the two planned a quiet wedding in Gibraltar. However, the ceremony almost didn't happen. Due to rising political tensions and a passport issue, Sento was detained at the border and missed her ferry. Luckily, she made it just in time for the ceremony, and they married in secret. After their son Jason was born, Connery kept his promise to Hamilton by naming the child after her own son. Sento stepped back from her own career to support Connery and raised Jason, even accompanying him to the set of From Russia with Love. The Bond franchise was exploding in popularity, and though Ian Fleming had originally doubted Connery, he gradually warmed to him. Before his death in 1964, the author began altering the Bond character, softening his edges and adding wit, traits inspired by Connery's performance. As the Bond films soared in popularity, Sean Connery's place as a superstar was solidified. He also stirred up anxiety and doubt. Even before producers officially handed him the role of James Bond, Sean Connery had grave concerns about being typecast. He worried that signing on for 5 films would trap him in the shadow of 007 for the rest of his career. It was Diane Colento, still his wife at the time, who ultimately convinced him to do it. But it was a decision she would come to deeply regret. By 1965, the pressure and strain had taken their toll. Colento publicly announced she was leaving Connery, taking their son Jason and her daughter from a previous marriage with her. Connery's reaction was unfeeling and abrupt. He packed his things and left the family home before Colento even had the chance. Despite their separation, they briefly reunited on the set of Thunderball, the 4th Bond film. But things were already fractured beyond repair. Crew members later recalled hearing loud, bitter arguments between the couple while filming. Once the cameras stopped rolling and they returned home, their troubles only intensified. Connery had become a massive international star, while Colento's acting career had stalled. The imbalance in their professional lives bred resentment and insecurity. Though they stubbornly tried to keep the marriage together for the sake of their children, it was clearly a ticking time bomb. By the mid-60s, Connery had become such a valuable asset to Hollywood that he began leveraging his clout. He successfully pushed the studio to land him a role in Alfred Hitchcock's Marnie, a serious break from the Bond persona. With just 2 Bond films left in his contract, he began to hope that a life beyond the tuxedo was finally within reach. But as fate would have it, just like in the movies, every time he thought he was out, they pulled him back in. Long before Tom Cruise made it cool, Sean Connery was performing many of his own stunts. But on Thunderball, that commitment nearly cost him his life. In one pivotal underwater sequence, Connery had to swim through a tank filled with live sharks. He was immediately uneasy about the idea. To ease his fears, the crew constructed a plexiglass partition to separate the actor from the predators. However, due to poor planning, the partition wasn't long enough. During the shoot, one shark slipped through the gap and entered Connery's space. He immediately scrambled out of the pool, narrowly avoiding what could have been a gruesome accident. At the start of the 1960s, Connery had the world at his feet. He was newly married, newly famous, and leading one of the biggest franchises in a cinematic history. But by the end of the decade, both his marriage and career were sources of personal frustration. The Bond films had made him a household name, but they also left him feeling boxed in. When it came time to film You Only Live Twice, Connery made it clear to producers that he was finished with Bond. They began searching for a replacement. His marriage with Cilento also collapsed shortly thereafter, and the couple officially separated in February 1971. Connery didn't waste time moving on. Though he dated around in the years that followed, there was only one woman who captured both his interest and his heart, French-Moroccan. Painter Micheline Roquebrune. When they first met, both were still married, so their connection simmered in the background until they had each finalized their divorces. Once free, the couple quickly became inseparable. The press was all over them, speculating about a wedding. In early 1974, Connery, however, detested the attention and concocted a clever ruse. In March 1975, he told reporters they had secretly married 4 months earlier, a total fabrication. The real wedding took place 2 months later, in a quiet ceremony away from prying eyes. Meanwhile, the Bond franchise faced a major crisis. George Lazenby had taken over the role after Connery's departure, signing a 7-film contract. But Lazenby's turn as Bond in On Her Majesty's Secret Service was widely panned, and he walked away after just 1 movie. Despite everything he had done to distance himself from the role, Connery shocked the world by agreeing to return as Bond in 1971's Diamonds Are Forever. It wasn't a sentimental decision. Connery negotiated an enormous fee for his return, and more importantly, he demanded the right to make 2 films of his choosing afterward. The studio agreed. Connery used part of his paycheck to establish a charitable trust supporting young Scottish artists, giving back to the community that raised him. With Diamonds Are Forever completed and Bond finally behind him, Sean Connery was ready to step into a new chapter of his career and life. In 1974, Sean Connery made what was arguably the strangest choice of his career by starring in the surreal science fiction film Zardoz. Best remembered for Connery's now infamous costume, a red mankini-style outfit with thigh-high boots and a ponytail, the film baffled audiences and critics alike. Though the character design would go on to be endlessly parodied, including comparisons to Borat's later look, the decision behind the role wasn't made out of eccentricity. According to director John Boorman, Connery was struggling to find meaningful work after stepping away from the Bond franchise, and Zardoz was one of the few projects that offered him a lead role. Though panned upon release, the film slowly gained cult status in later years, appreciated by niche audiences for its strange and philosophical vision. By the 1980s, Connery's legacy as a screen legend had solidified. Despite the difficulties he faced after Bond, he was now regarded with reverence in the film industry. Perhaps with some lingering feelings about his first exit from the franchise, Connery made a surprising return to the role that made him famous in 1983's Never Say Never Again, a rival Bond film not produced by Eon Productions. The title itself was a wink at Connery's previous insistence that he would never reprise the role. The production, however, was a nightmare. Connery clashed constantly with the inexperienced producer, took over many of the production responsibilities himself, and even suffered a broken wrist during fight training. He handpicked the screenwriters and pushed for rewrites, essentially micromanaging the entire shoot. The grueling experience finally convinced him to abandon Bond for good. This time, never again truly meant never. In 1993, Connery's personal life became front-page tabloid fodder when singer-songwriter Lindsay DePaul alleged she'd had an affair with him in 1989, while his wife Micheline was sitting right beside him at the moment of their first flirtation. DePaul claimed that Connery abruptly cut off the relationship after 5 months and left her devastated, calling it one of the biggest mistakes of her life. Connery denied the affair, and Micheline never publicly commented on the situation, choosing instead to continue supporting her husband quietly through the controversy. Connery's career continued into the late 90s and early 2000s, with roles in films like The Rock, Entrapment, and Finding Forrester. However, it was The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen in 2003 that marked the beginning of the end. The production was plagued by issues, most notably a contentious relationship between Connery and director Stephen Norrington. The two reportedly clashed on nearly every aspect of the project, with Connery later criticizing Norrington's direction in interviews. When asked where the director was during the film's release party, Connery quipped that the man was probably in the local asylum. Though he never issued an official retirement announcement, Connery quietly stepped away from acting after the disastrous experience. Then in 2006, his past returned to haunt him. His ex-wife Diane Cilento released her autobiography, in which she accused Connery of subjecting her to both physical and emotional abuse during their marriage. Connery denied the allegations, stating unequivocally that he did not believe any form of abuse toward women was ever acceptable. Unfortunately, journalists unearthed a damaging quote from a 1965 interview in which Connery controversially stated, "I don't think there is anything particularly wrong in hitting a woman, although I don't recommend you do it the same way that you hit a man." Though Connery had attempted to distance himself from those words in later years, the quote lingered, casting a shadow over his legacy in the eyes of many. On October 31, 2020, the world received the news that Sean Connery had died peacefully. In his sleep at the age of 90, the announcement came via a joint statement from his family and the James Bond production company. Despite the controversies, difficult moments, and bizarre career turns, Connery remains one of cinema's most enduring icons, a working-class Scotsman who transformed into a global symbol of style, masculinity, and movie star power.